Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to start with saying thanks to ISD for having me here today. I'm delighted to be involved in the event, and also I'm really pleased that ISD and their partners are beginning to tackle some of the wider environmental and social issues to do with design. As Tara said, my talk is going to focus on what we as a centre consider to be good design. I thought we'd start with a quote. I think it's worth reading, and it's also worth thinking about when this quote actually came from, who it came from, and where it came from. And the messages are quite clear about being more thoughtful. So thoughtful in how we produce, how we design, how we consume, and generally thoughtful through society. This came from 1976 from a guy called Dieter Rams. I'm sure all the designers in the room will be very familiar with Dieter. He's a really inspiring person. His work is massively inspiring. But this is from 1976. So what's happened between 1976 and 2013? Unfortunately, we continue to live in a throwaway society. Yet there is no way. We know there is limited or no landfill space. And the whole idea of throwing things away doesn't actually make any sense. In fact, 98% of products are thrown away within the first 6 months. We can't ignore the problem. We can't continue to hide away from the problem. We also know we over-consume. I mean, loads of studies have been done in the UK, internationally, and the message is always the same. We consume up to 3, 4, 5 times our planet requirements. We also see far more of a disconnect that I would argue between people now than we would have seen in the 70s, and between planet and people. And very, very important, the true costs of what we're doing, from design through to manufacture, through to consumption, is not being accounted for. I'll come back to that. So in terms of true costs, I'll give an example, and Owen Bailey in the back of the room has far more knowledge to speak about this product than I have. But a few years back, Owen asked me to get involved with a project in a company called Harman, and we were looking at speakers for cars. And one of the things that Owen identified working with us was neodymium was one of the key materials they were using for the magnets for the speakers, for performance issues, efficiency, etc. But neodymium has been since deemed to be what they call a critical, a rare material element. Unfortunately, with neodymium, while it's got lots of advantages in terms of low carbon technology, in terms of moving towards what we call a low carbon economy, and it's been used a lot in products such as wind turbines, electric vehicles, etc., it also has a lot of associated true cost externalities. In fact, the pollution issues are very significant when you go back in terms of the initial processing. You look at the health issues, again, very, very significant when you look at the health issues to do with the people who actually process and manufacture these materials. And you also look at the knock-on aspects such as pollution to do with cars and a failure to recover or to design products for a circular sort of long-term approach. And like I said, Owen in the back is much better to speak about that, and if any questions about the product, I'm sure Owen would be happy to talk about it. But the point is, true costs have to be considered, and they're not being considered at the moment. So how do we know if something is good design? Because Tara obviously contacted me to do the talk, and I was delighted to be asked, gave me an opportunity to do some research into what people consider good design to be. And if you do some searching on the kind of search channels I use, which tend to be Google as a starting point, you find that there's an ongoing debate on what good design actually is. And people really struggle to agree. And even in the media channels, it's an ongoing debate. New York Times, BBC, there's always someone discussing what good design is. Now, I'll go back to Dieter Rams. This is from the 70s. He came up with what was called 10 Commandments of good design. You don't have to dwell on them, but you look at some of the principles that came out. Usefulness, honest, long-lasting, and environmentally friendly. These 10 principles, commandments, whatever you want to call them, are just as relevant, if not more relevant now, all those years later, yet they're not being applied. This is one of the products that Dieter Rams is probably better known for. It's called Universal Shelving. I think it's quite inspiring to think so many years later that a product that's been designed with these principles in mind is still being used. And those products that were designed and manufactured back in the 60s are still fully functional. I think that's really, really interesting. And it's something we should aspire to do with a lot more products that we produce, manufacture, and use. This is another great product. It's called the Life Straw. And obviously this, as you can tell from the pictures, this allows people to drink polluted water and makes it safe for them. What a great product. What a great design. What a socially useful design, inclusive design. And then you get products like these, and I guess some people will have seen me speak about these before, and I won't dwell on them. One is called the iPotty, and it's basically being designed for toilet training for your kids, so they can actually sit on this iPotty and play with the iPad at the same time. The other product is the Banana Guard, which is to protect your single banana as you go on your journey. So you'd have to question the real need for these products, the design intentions behind them, but also look at the 10 principles that Dieter Rams came up with in the 70s. Ask yourself the question, how well did they match? So can design be good? I've asked this question for so many years in Wales. I came over here in '95. I was doing some research for this talk. I looked at my slides from 10 years ago, which I was presenting to the Welsh Government when I was trying to convince them that this was a good idea, and thankfully they were prepared to listen to me. This was the exact same question on the slides 10 years ago. My answer is still no. And to me, bad design is a social crime. I think we need to move up the ante. We need to stop accepting design as it is. Too many excuses. Time to move on. To me, the behavior aspect is key. Good design is about how we behave. Not just the design industry, all industry, everyone here in the room. Whether you're a product user, manufacturer, processor, whatever stage of this life cycle you fit in. I think that we're continuing to experience this unconscious behavior. It's a collective behavior. We're seeing it every day. If I'm going to be nice to everyone and nice to myself, I will argue it's unconscious. We don't realize we're doing it. But the consequences are severe. So for me, every design choice has a consequence. We know that up to 80% may be higher for certain products, may be lower for certain products. But 80% has been shown by lots and lots of different sources of design impacts, environment impacts are determined at the design stage. It's a high responsibility, a high opportunity for the design community. So we need to change a lot of things. And people often point a finger, and I do as well, at the design industry, which I'm part of. But it's not just design in business. It's design in policy, design in education, and design in all aspects of life. We need to change. Good design needs to be embedded in all policy, not just a few policy options. All education courses, all designers should be trained, educated, whatever language you want to use, to have the right skills and competencies and knowledge, to go out and ask the right questions and make the right decisions, work in a collaborative way across the life cycle. We need change across the board. Now for me, and for the Eco Design Centre, what we believe is good design requires life cycle thinking. It requires systems thinking. You need to think in a systems perspective. There's been a lot of talk about market failure. To us, it's system failure. It's a system issue. Designers have a great opportunity because we know they interact between industry users and other actors. We know they influence and can influence how we use, behave, consume. In fact, I think one of the great opportunities facing us in the next 12 months is for designers to begin to understand even more how we can begin to influence people's behavior people's perceptions. If you look at very, very quickly at some of the things that we know are happening globally, we know there's population growth. It's significant. We know there's resource scarcity. It's in the news, in the media every week. We know people are moving back into cities, and we know there's lots of emerging economies who want to consume like we have consumed for so long now. We know it's an aging population. We know we're losing so much knowledge. This generation of 60 plus, we're losing it, and we shouldn't be losing it. We need to be more inclusive. So we all have to change. Our mission as a centre is quite simple. Our mission is to make eco-design happen. That's where we fit in the equation. And we do so through collaboration along the life cycle. That's my current team at the moment, the 6 of us based in an office in Cardiff. Hopefully be 8 people by the end of July. Our focus is working on collaborative projects. And this just gives you a quick snapshot of some of our work we're doing in Europe. There's 4 major projects in Europe at the moment. I'll mention 2 of them very briefly. One is a project called LCA2Go, which is life cycle assessment. Life cycle assessment cannot be ignored. It's not just a simple request, it's a must. We're ignoring life cycle assessment, and as a result, we're making so many bad decisions. This project is a collaboration with 19 partners across Europe and Asia, and we're developing tools for life cycle assessment for SMEs. Another project I'll pick up on there is called Cyclid. We're looking at closing the loop, circular economy, eco-innovation for LED products. So working with partners across the life cycle, not just designers, not just academics, not just researchers. We're working with manufacturers, processors, recyclers, people like Philips Lighting. Okay, so the single problem for me in terms of all of this type of issue over the last few years, I guess if I had to pick one problem, and I love this quote, this really, I suppose, relates back to me, because I've done so many talks, as people in the room here know, and people have seen me speak for quite a long time in Wales. Sometimes we think something's come across, and sometimes it doesn't come across, and probably a lot of times it doesn't come across. And I guess if you look at the illustration, I think that often feels like me as well. For so long, I've been speaking about these issues, and for so long, no one's listening. Yes, it's great people are listening now, but it's more about listening. It's about doing. I'd prefer not to be speaking about these issues anymore. I prefer to be going to the next thing. We should be all embracing this at this stage. I'll give you just a quick snapshot of my sort of journey, if you want to call it, through eco-design. Back in 1988 was my first project. I was doing my degree in Ireland. I was going to my final year of a 4-year degree. It was year 3. It was to do with technology. It was to do with psychology. It was to do with materials. I couldn't come up with a final year project because I didn't really buy into the idea of designing and making stuff unless there was a reason behind it. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to a chemistry professor, Dr. Peter Childs, who asked me would I look at recycling issues to do with design. That was 1988. Did a project over 12 months. Actually, I spent my whole summer holidays working. I got basically involved straight away in the subject. The following year, I worked with a company recycling products. It was 1989. It was computer products. My job was to strip them down, take out the gold and silver, because it was worthwhile at the time. A few years later, I worked with a Japanese company for 4 years, designing computer products. Our main client was Apple. For Apple, we used to design and develop keyboards. I was part of the design team. We designed what we considered the perfect eco-design product of its time back in 1993. A few years later, I went back doing some research for my PhD. I found that one keyboard that we had invested our design effort in back in the early 90s was being shredded by the recyclers. Why? We had designed it for this assembly and recycling. From a recycler's point of view, it wasn't worth taking apart. A big lesson from my perspective. Picked up, I suppose, another example, again I mentioned earlier, working with Owen and Harman, 2009, 2010, and the fact that, again, working with, I consider a lot of my career has been with multinationals, the biggest players in the world in terms of computers, TVs, etc. You expect them to have addressed issues. 2009, working with Owen, obviously another big company hadn't considered the issues. And here we are in 2013. I'm an Apple fan. I have been all my life. It really frustrates me where Apple have gone. working with Apple for 4 years, but actually longer as a consultant as well. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, we did things differently back then. Apple's designs, I still can't resist them, I must say, but the design process they go through is very different now. A lot of the key people who worked in the 90s have left. Unfortunately, Apple, what they do isn't as inspiring from my perspective in terms of good design anymore. So way forward, I thought this was a great illustration from a young guy called Jesse Stewart, which I found on the web. For a long time, we thought the Earth was flat. For a long, long time. And then we realized it wasn't flat anymore. For a long time, we thought a linear economy could continue to be as it was. I think now we're beginning to realize it can't. It seems kind of ironic when you look at the flat Earth and you look at the flat economy, you think that analogy and you think the reality behind it. But there is no magic materials. The question we always get from industry and designers is, tell me the material that we can use and we'll go away and use it. It's not that simple. It's choosing materials for the right application, considering the full life cycle. People who know me know how much respect I have for Orangebox. We've worked with them for 6 years now, providing background research for the products that they design and manufacture. They're a Welsh company, proud to be Welsh, based in the Welsh Valleys, employ 200 plus people. In fact, the number is increasing, doing very well at the moment. Their philosophy, our philosophy, eco-design is good design. They've done all the right things. They've designed the products as far as they can in terms of eco-design. Doc Martens, I love my Doc Martens, and if I have my vices, it's Doc Martens and Converse shoes. But Doc Martens, thankfully from my perspective, have come up with a product called a Doc Marten for Life. It's only one product of a huge range. It's quite a limited range, but it's an interesting concept. You can take the product back, it can be repaired, and you get it back again. So it kind of gives you the scenario where every summer when it's too warm, you switch to Converse, you give your Doc Martens back to Doc company, they repair it for you, have a new pair for the end of the year. But then you look at Doc Martens and people like them to be worn, so it's obviously a challenge from that perspective. Ocean plastic, you've probably heard of it, some of you have heard of it anyway, this big soup of plastic in the ocean from all the materials we've thrown away over the years. It's a big issue. It looks like an island, but it's a soup. But a company called Method have taken some of the plastic, combined it with others, and produced this new product. I want to speak a small bit about responsible business because there's a lot of talk about business models. Business models, new business models, they've been around for years. There's nothing new in them. The key thing here I want to get across is they need to be responsible. It's not about moving to a new business model. You have the responsibility built into it, i.e. the ethics, the social, the environmental. We need, whether we like it or not, to move more and more towards this element up here in terms of no ownership and sharing. I don't know who's prepared to move there. Very few people are, but we have no choice. So design has such a key role to play in not just changing products and processes and services, but in changing people's behavior to move us up here. Moving more towards sharing, leasing, no ownership. We're in a culture where we all have to own everything. We have our own drill, our own lawnmower, everything. And we're not happy if we do. And the more we own, the better we feel, which seems so sad, but it's a reality of the culture we live in. An interesting company, a great company as well. I have a lot of respect for Interface. They have basically written a whole new way of doing business by approaching how they offer their product to their customer through a leasing agreement, through a service agreement. So instead of buying the carpet, you buy the service. One of the projects we're doing with Philips at the moment is we're looking at, instead of buying the light bulbs, you buy the light. So you're moving away from ownership to leasing. Likewise, you've seen these bike schemes. They had it in Cardiff for a while. I don't know why it's gone, but I guess it was some type of pilot scheme which wasn't taken up. But the idea, instead of having a bike, you'd obviously, if you weren't a frequent user like me, instead of having a bike you'd use twice a year, you'd rent a bike instead or lease a bike. It kind of makes a bit more sense, really. So going back to Orangebox and going back to good design, I guess this is where I am at the moment, really. Eco-design is there. You can design products, no problem. Yes, there are problems in many ways. Sometimes the materials, sometimes how you design to be disassembled, more durable. but the solutions are generally out there. There are challenges. You know, we need to get more collaboration, obviously. We need to get more information from the material producers to the manufacturers. We still have a situation where a lot of manufacturers are using materials, but they don't know what's in it. So they don't know if it's toxic or if it can be recycled or what the properties are. So we need to move away from that kind of culture. The biggest challenge we have at the moment, okay, there's two challenges. One, okay, we might be at product eco-design, but most businesses aren't there yet, but they should be. The biggest challenge is the environment around it. Going back to systems failure, it is a systems failure. So I'm using the word environment again, but I'm using the context of true cost. You know, we have to start costing externalities. People are talking about a circular economy, but they're not talking about the issues that have to be addressed before the circular economy can even be part of reality. In other words, true costs are not being considered when we talk about circular economy. Or overconsumption. Our business models, yes, but they need to be responsible. The infrastructure, Orange Box have a great range of products. They've been designed, eco-designed, for long life, disassembly, reuse. The problem is there's no infrastructure there. No one else is ready for it. They are, but no one else is. The accountants aren't ready, because the accountants don't want to move to a different type of accountancy. So accountants have to change as well. If you're not buying things anymore, then you have to think about business very differently. The people, it always goes back to people. Dieter Rams in an interview, I don't know how recent it was, he was asked the question, what's the most important thing behind moving forward in design? And he spoke about responsibility and he spoke about people. And we can have as much stuff as we like in the room, but ultimately we are the people using that stuff. And obviously LCA. LCA is being ignored for one simple reason, it's not blooming easy. And we're prepared as an organisation to try and address it, but I don't see many other organisations addressing it. I don't see government either. And I think it's a crying shame that life cycle assessment isn't being taken seriously. Because what's happening is we're making decisions that we think are the right decision. But it's been shown all we're doing is we're shifting burden from one stage of the life cycle to the other. There's loads of examples where things have gone dramatically wrong as a result. It's not easy. I don't have the answers. We as a centre don't have the answers, but we're trying to get them with the right people. And that's why, as a centre, we don't focus our energy on Wales only. And we've been criticised in the past for being maybe not working enough in Wales. We're a centre of excellence under the Welsh Government, and we're delighted to be working with the Welsh Government on the policy side. But for us, it's all about working with the best people globally to bring the knowledge and expertise back to Wales. And there are other issues too, which we haven't got time to cover now. So for me, good design considerations. Okay, they have to. Dieter Rams' 10 Commandments, what a great starting point from so long ago. It goes back to full life cycle, systems thinking, true cost. Key issues, LCA. That will help us get there in terms of key issues. Don't change something because it's easy to change. Change it because there's a reason behind it and you've got evidence to make that change. Don't shift the burden. LCA can help us there. Look at transformation. Don't design things for consumption. Look at how materials, resources can be transferred, transformed into other products and materials. It's new models of business. And it's also, we all, me included, have to move away from ownership. So eco-design criteria, if I had to come up with 4, I came up with 4. Long life, I like things long life, I like things non-toxic. I like the idea of localized manufacture. It's not always possible, but I like the idea. And I like the idea of everything being renewable. It sounds really good to me. Mindset changes. I think this applies to everyone. Stop using the word waste. You know, I work an awful lot with the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, and we always talk about this. But stop using the word waste. Use resource instead. It's need and use, not consume. I'm not consuming the computer, I'm using it. That computer I'm using can go on to another cycle. If I was consuming it, it wouldn't actually go down very well, I don't think. So how to transform stuff, not destroy it. Wider life cycle circular economy team. Designers are obviously a key to making this happen, but they cannot happen in isolation. I think we all know that. And the thing about collaboration, it sounds great when I speak about it, and we all speak about it in partnership. The actuality of making it happen is far more challenging. And I think our own egos all come into the fore. So I think, let's not just talk about these things, let's actually go away and make them happen. So the big thing comes all the time is that people, oh, it's just the way it is. Can't do anything about it. Well, we've done this way for the last 40 years, and what can I do about it? Well, I think we all took that attitude. It would be not such a nice place to work in and not such a nice place to live in. You know, I believe that a centre like us with 6 people in Cardiff can make a difference. It might be idealistic, but I believe we can make a contribution. I think everyone can make a contribution, however small that is, it's significant. We need everyone to buy into this. So we would like to think, and this is our vision for a small centre in Cardiff, that good design would be the norm, and then we could retire happily in a world where good design is accepted as being part of our everyday culture. And this is a concept I think is quite interesting. You may have seen it. It's this idea of a passport. Now, a lot of companies, I guess more than niche products, are moving towards history files and, okay, this idea of having product history. This is a product, it's a Dutch company, and basically they offer a passport with every item of furniture you get. So you have the passport with the item of furniture. If you decide to pass it on, someone else gets the passport, and it becomes something a bit more, I suppose, an emotional attachment to it. But it'd be nice to think in Wales, we could design things, make them, to remake them, and have no waste as such. And zero waste is more like an aspiration, but it's always about resource. So to go back to Dieter Rams, who's been in my head constantly for the last couple of weeks, and he's still alive in his 80s. I think for someone like him and someone like Gandhi, they quite clearly believed in what they were doing. And from my perspective, I think we should all strive to believe in what we're doing and take that through in what we do every day. And I think going back to your own roles and my role as well, it's fashionable to be part of the agenda nowadays. It wasn't fashionable for a long time when I was involved, which was quite nice in its own way. It's fashionable to be involved now. Be more than fashionable to be involved. Be relevant. Be contributing. Find out what your role is. Understand where you can get involved and really explore how collaboration can happen. Thank you.